So we are on the clock. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. Welcome to this WMU Alumni Webinar. My name is Zhen Sun. I'm the research officer at WMU Sasakawa Global Ocean Institute. Among other things, I am the co-PI with Professor Momoko Kitada for the program on empowering women for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Today's event is organized by the WMU Women's Association to mark International Women's Day with the theme on women in leadership, passes through education. Before we officially begin the program, I would like to share a few housekeeping notes. So the webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. Participants, please submit your questions using the Q&A session. We will endeavor to answer all your questions. For those who hasn't been addressed during the live presentation, will be answered through the alumni office. The next thing is we will launch a poll on the gender of our participants. The response will be anonymous and for data collection purpose only, and we will share the results before the end of this webinar. Now, let's officially begin. Turning into the opening speech, there is no greater pleasure to introduce the president of the World Maritime University. Dr. Cleopatra Dombier-Henry is a world-famous international lawyer. Among other things, she has brought decades of experience in the International Labour Organization. Dr. Dombier-Henry has been an inspiring role model for many and has been an active advocate on gender equality across the world. Madam President, we're pleased to have you. Please have the mic.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to all of you for the organization of this seminar, of this webinar, and certainly on International Women's Day. It is certainly not just timely, but certainly necessary. And I'm very pleased that all of you came together with the alumni office and the alumni of WMU to host this event. So for me, a great pleasure. So Ms. Alison Webb, who is the lead for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, Fisheries, and Oceans Canada. Miss Lena Dyring, who is the Director of Cruise Operations at the Norwegian Seafarers Union. Lena, it's great to see you. And thank you again for the support of the trade union, the Seafarers Union, for supporting WMU, and as for Ms. Jensen as well for Canada, the role of Canada with WMU, which is fantastic, and particularly the engagement with the Global Ocean Institute. WMU alumni, students, participants, guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the president of the WMU, the World Maritime University, it indeed gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this year's International Women's Day webinar on women in leadership, paths through education. I joined WMU in the summer of 2015, serving as the first female president of the university. Prior to joining WMU, I served as the director of 3 different departments, and my last my last role was as director of the International Labour Standards for 11 years. So over 30 years, I did two 11-year terms in one department and one in another department. And so it's really been a very big panorama of issues and areas with which I've had to deal with in that function. As the president of WMU, my role is to ensure that I take the university forward. It is a university that also belongs to the United Nations system, to IMO, and therefore it is for me an honor to be able to lead another international organization in the academic field, which is what WMU is. Empowering women and pursuing gender equality at all levels in the maritime and ocean sectors have been a key item on my work list, as I indicated, for many, many years. This year's theme for International Women's Day, and I quote the theme, WMU in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. This theme seeks to celebrate the tremendous efforts of women and girls around the world in shaping a more equal future and recovery, particularly from COVID-19 pandemic, while highlighting the gaps that remain. Unfortunately, COVID will, sort of stretch that gap even wider for women, and that is one of our important concerns. But today, I want to start on a positive note. Through the past 100 years, there have been an undeniable progress made on women's empowerment and on gender equality. We must acknowledge these achievements that have been made over the years, even if there is yet so much more to be done to enable all women and girls to enjoy equal opportunity in all countries around the world. We have witnessed more women taking up positions as heads of governments, ministers, leaders of international organizations, and in the private sector, as well as important roles as scientists, as engineers, pilots, seafarers, doctors, and judges, among many others. Importantly, the public awareness of gender equality is on the rise. Achieving gender equality is one of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It provides a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. In 2019, the theme, Empowering Women in the Maritime Community, was selected as the World Maritime Day theme by the International Maritime Organization, our mother institution. And the United Nations celebrated World Oceans Day with the theme, Gender and the Oceans. Despite these events, we must acknowledge that we are still very, very far from achieving equal rights and equal opportunities for everyone, including women and men. This is especially so with respect to the holding of leadership positions, the low number of women's participation and representation are among the most evident in the maritime and ocean industry, which have traditionally been dominated by men. In the maritime sector, women still today account for only about 2% of the total seafaring population. The latest Global Ocean Science Report of 2020 that was revealed that women continue to be underrepresented in ocean science, particularly in the highly technical categories. More importantly, the level of female representation varies from country to country. Female ocean science personnel ranged from about 7%, for example, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to 72% in a country like Ireland. So well done, Ireland, for the leadership role. And for this, of all social science, ocean science personnel. We have to continue fighting for women's empowerment at all levels and in every field. And a crucial tool to achieve this is no other than education and training. I am proud to say that WMU during the past 37 years has provided education to over 1,100 female graduates from 170 countries. And they have gone on to work in various government agencies and in institutions. Some of them hold very senior positions, which is an important indicator of progress. Currently, we have about 35% women in our intake of 2021. We have a 35% women intake, and at our Malmo campus and at our campus in Shanghai, I am very proud to say that we have 50% women. We are continuing to work very hard with our donors to establish more fellowships for female students. This is a plea and a rallying cry for more fellowships for women. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our keynote speakers for today, representing Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Norwegian Seafarers Union. These two institutions have been investing in women professionals through their generous fellowships, and our great big thanks to these two institutions. They are truly role models in the maritime and ocean sectors, and it is our privilege to have them as keynote speakers today. And with this, I want to thank all of you who are participating in this webinar to engage with us and to ensure that together, alone we can't really achieve what we want to do, but together with the rallying cry of both men and women, and I can see three of them on our screen right now, at least my screen, Professor Long, Professor Max Mejia, and Pete Marriott, champions for women. Thank you very much for being with us today, and for all the other men that are joining us. This is the time for us to take this issue forward, not only in words, but in action. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the positive and encouraging words, Madam President. Now, turning to the keynote speech, first, I would like to invite Professor Rona Long, the director of WMU Sasakawa Global Ocean Institute, to introduce our first keynote speaker, Ms. Ellen Webb. Professor Long, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jensen. Thank you very much, Madam President. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody across the world who is joining us this afternoon in Sweden. A very happy International Women's Day. It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege to introduce Director Alison Webb, who has had an extraordinary career at Fisheries and Oceans Canada. I know it's very early in the morning over in Vancouver, Director Webb, but thank you very much for joining us. You've had an extraordinary career at Fisheries and Oceans on a whole range of operational issues, particularly in fisheries science and in senior management roles, including negotiating with industry and indeed with the First Nations communities. It's particularly interesting for us at the World Maritime University to see that you have a very strong background in history, political science, and indeed public policy. And I believe that has perhaps provided you with the skills and foundation for your leadership role. I would also like to commend Canada on this occasion for your leadership on women empowerment and indeed gender equality issues. This is very, very important to us at the university. And indeed, we would like to thank you for your support for our gender empowerment program. Without further ado, Director Webb, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Long, for the kind introduction. And hello to all of you from Vancouver, Canada, where I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Thank you for the kind invitation to speak and share in this dialogue with such an esteemed group of colleagues. Happy International Women's Day to all of you awesome women out there and to everyone else who supports us. On this day, but also every day, this is a critically important topic. And I feel passionate about this as a female leader in the Government of Canada. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about what Canada has done and plans to do in regard to leadership on gender equity in the context of the Ocean Decade. For those of you who are not as familiar with the Ocean Decade, there is time to build your understanding, as the Ocean Decade provides a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to work together to leverage all of our expertise to reverse the decline in ocean health by generating the science needed to support the sustainable development of our shared ocean. This is a huge opportunity, but also a daunting challenge, and truly requires all hands on deck to be successful. Right now, I think it's fair to say that not everybody who needs to be with us on deck is there. And this isn't limited to women. The Ocean Decade will need to tackle this cultural change to be truly successful. It needs to consider how to have participation across gender, geography, and areas of expertise to be truly inclusive. When we consider women in leadership roles in science, the statistics show us that we still have a ways to go to get to a place where women can fully contribute to their maximum potential. This is also different depending on where you live, and we want to aspire to be in a future state where women are equally represented in leadership roles, regardless of geography. Many of you will be very familiar with the leaky pipeline. To close this gap, we need a multi-pronged approach, and we need to be deliberate about this. We need to be bold, to be revolutionary, and to bring everyone along with this change. In that vein, I'd like to talk a little bit about the work that Canada is supporting on gender equity through the Ocean Decade, as increasing gender equity is one of Canada's key priorities. Canada is focusing on empowering women by removing barriers to their participation in ocean science, as well as policymaking and management to support sustainable development. How do we do this? We'll take action in a number of areas. Firstly, we'll continue to elevate female leaders to provide exposure for them, opportunities to develop skills, and also to build professional networks. And we won't just focus on women in one particular area or time of their career. We'll focus on women at the entire continuum, starting with youth to early career professionals, to mid-professionals, to senior representatives. We'd like to see women supported at all levels. Secondly, we'll host events that promote gender equity that are accessible to all. We've already held events on November 10th, February 11th, and following this wonderful event, we'll be hosting an event today, and we invite all of you to participate. That particular event is focused on women and leadership. These events are focused on inspiring women and girls, and also providing tools and networking opportunities. Next, we'll raise gender as an important consideration across all work and champion this issue to try to hardwire this into the culture of the ocean community. This includes collecting gender data and identifying metrics related to gender, because without this, we don't know where we're starting from and where we're going. Building on best practices in Canada will promote the use of gender-based analysis in all the work of the Ocean Decade to ensure that gender is a proactive and fundamental consideration in the design, development, and implementation of all initiatives, from research to policy, rather than an afterthought. And last, we'll fund projects that advance gender equity outside our borders with international partners and encourage other funders to join us to leverage our contributions. For example, we've been working with the International Hydrographic Organization to increase the presence, participation, and leadership of women from member states in all IHO bodies. Another project that I would like to highlight is our collaboration with the World Maritime University, who are leading work to help us understand the state of gender equity at the start of the Ocean Decade and identify barriers for women to conducting ocean science and to participating in science-based policymaking processes. This work will help us achieve better outcomes for the Ocean Decade and for gender equity overall. I was asked for some thoughts about the pandemic and gender equity. One of my observations is that COVID-19 has created a situation with virtual meetings that has democratized participation, which should provide women with more opportunities for involvement than prior to COVID, whereas before only the very lucky and often privileged could attend international meetings and conferences, those often being male and people in very senior positions. Virtual meetings allow for broader participation and more voices, including those that are more diverse and can help in shifting the dominant conversation and outcomes. I think it's too early to understand the effect of the pandemic, but I think that this is one of the silver linings of COVID, while recognizing that other impacts are not as positive. I challenge all of us to continue to think how we can use technology to support more empowerment of women in our design of events and projects during the pandemic and post-pandemic environment as we learn from this experience together. Lastly, beyond technology, I encourage you personally to take on the role of champion for gender equity wherever you are in your career and organization. We can all show leadership in our actions, big and small, and together they will make a difference. I look forward to listening to other presenters and continuing this important dialogue with the WMU and other partners during the Ocean Decade to advance gender equity. You can count on Canada's leadership on this important initiative to ensure that we harness the potential of women across the globe. We hope you join us to lend more voices to this important work through the Ocean Decade, that the involvement of women looks significantly different in 2030 than it does today. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts about this important topic with all of you. My hope is that we've started a conversation that will continue long past today and ripple through the work of the Ocean Decade and build more and more momentum towards a tidal wave of change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Webb, for sharing Canada's practice on promoting gender equality. It certainly is a champion, and we all look for Canada for directions. Now, may I invite Professor Max Mahier, the Director of PhD Program and Associate Academic Dean at WMU, to introduce our second keynote speaker, Ms. Lena Darren. Professor Maxier, you have the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. It is both a privilege and a pleasure to be given this task to introduce our next keynote speaker, Ms. Lena Dyring. Ms. Lena Dyring is Director of Cruise Operations for the Norwegian Seafarers Union, where, supported by a talented team around her, her main role is to negotiate and maintain collective bargaining agreements for seafarers on cruise ships, help seafarers covered by these agreements from all over the world, and, under normal circumstances, educate seafarers on their rights and obligations while working at sea. Ms. Lena Dyring is also the women's representative on the ITF Seafarers section, where her role is to promote and further women seafarers' rights, both in their jobs and within the union movement. Lena is from right outside of Oslo, Norway, but she's also lived in the United States for many years before returning to Norway just a few years ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us please welcome Ms. Lena Dyring.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that kind introduction. And that was perfect name pronunciation, and that's very impressive. Thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you so much again, and thank you also for inviting me to talk here today. And it's definitely an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to address you today. On this International Women's Day, we have some time and space to reflect on the role women have in society and where the gaps still remain. So, and in our very own maritime industry, these gaps and where we want to be compared to where we actually are, these gaps are bigger than in many other industries around the world. And so for the sake of a sustainable future for the maritime industry, these gaps must be closed. As we all know, one of the most efficient ways to close equality gaps is to make sure that women have equal access to quality education. I know I may be boring you now with knowledge you already have, but this is too important not to be repeated. Equal access to education is the key that realizes all of the potential that gender equality has. You may think gender equality is important because it is the right thing to do towards women, which it is, But it is also what makes business sense to make sure you have a large pool of both women and men with the necessary skills and education to enter into the maritime labor force as it looks like today and as it will look like in the future, whether at sea or shoreside. Equal representation in all levels of a company or organization's hierarchy creates better decision-making processes, which in the end turns out better results for everyone. The maritime industry simply cannot afford to ignore 50% of the labor force. According to the OECD, the ocean industries are expected to create 40 million new jobs and double their contribution to the global economy by 2030. Although we're currently experiencing some setbacks with the ongoing COVID crisis, those will not last forever, and we have to have enough well-educated candidates ready to take on and lead through this expansion in a sustainable way. Maritime industry jobs, both at sea and shoreside, will require higher skill levels in the future, and in order to fill these roles, the education has to be there for women too. The role that the World Maritime University has in this regard and in the overall shaping of a sustainable future for the industry is very, very important. And in order to reach the sustainable development goals, women's economic empowerment through education is of course key. Educating a woman well is not a handout, nor is it being nice. It simply makes sense on all levels, for governments, companies, all the way to family levels, and it has positive repercussions for generations to come. As touched upon initially, the maritime industry and seafaring in particular has traditionally been extremely male-dominated. There are many reasons for this, but we need to look forward right now and find the solutions on how to change this gender imbalance for the good of the industry. A more gender-balanced workplace is a better workplace for everyone, and women's perspectives are important in creating policies that make it an attractive workplace for women. Right now, we see that the percentage of women seafarers may actually go down due to the COVID crisis. Many women seafarers work in the cruise industry, in catering and hotel roles, and these are the jobs that are lost right now. And these women, and men too, of course, have a very difficult time in sustaining their families financially. Looking forward, women in all levels of the maritime industry have an important role in thinking of and creating more opportunities for women in all roles and parts of the shipping industry. How can we make sure all seafaring jobs, including those I just mentioned, are given the rights and importance they deserve and are entitled to according to the Maritime Labor Convention? This is important in order to preserve and develop the roles that women have at sea. How do we attract more women to take on more technical seafaring jobs is another challenge. How do we make sure the industry becomes more compatible with family life and a lifelong career in the industry? And so many more challenges to consider and shape relevant policies for. These are some of the tasks we will need to have well-educated women leading us through. We at the Norwegian Seafarers Union are proud to call ourselves supporters of the World Maritime University, and for all of the reasons before, it is important to us that the fellow we support is a woman. We see the impact the World Maritime University graduates have. You end up in important decision-making roles in the maritime industry globally, where you have opportunities to address the issues that women have and increase women's participation and employment. So with this in mind, thank you so much for your time and attention, and congratulations on this International Women's Day 2021. And I cannot wait until we can see each other in person again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. Thanks to both of our keynote speeches, both inspiring. We would like to take a quick round of Q&A for those two keynote speakers, if there is any. Otherwise, we'll keep monitoring the Q&A session, and probably will come back to our speakers later. Now, if I may invite everyone to move on to our panel discussion. This panel will focus on the education program and experience that we have at the World Maritime University. We have three speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Ellen Johansson. Ellen is from Canada and now based in Denmark. She's currently enrolled in our PhD program under the Empowering Women for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development program. Ellen is also the coordinating officer at the Secretariat of the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. Ellen, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Jensen, and thanks to everyone. Greetings from Copenhagen. I'm pleased to be here with you all on International Women's Day and to reflect a little bit on the path that brought me to the Global Ocean Institute at the World Maritime University to complete a PhD as part of the Empowering Women for the UN Decade of Ocean Science program. So my path really started as far as from an ocean as you can possibly get on the planet in the middle of Canada. But I followed my academic interests in sustainability and human environmental interactions. And that led me down an interdisciplinary path focusing on environmental studies and then studying ecosystem approaches. And then as Jensen noted, I've been working the past 12 years in international science administration at the intergovernmental organization that coordinates marine science in the North Atlantic Ocean, that's ICES. And it was really this experience that inspired my research and to use ICES as a case study to study the role of gender in the practice of international marine science. It was my role supporting the council and the executive committee these past 10 years where I started to take notice of the underrepresentation of women and in the decision-making levels. And when you stop to count, you find women only represented by 20%. So we started to have these discussions with my boss and my mentor, who was also the first female general secretary of ICES in 100 years. We started to talk about what could be done internally in the organization to support change and encourage women to more leadership positions. And as noted by Alison Webb earlier, one of the most important issues is to have the evidence to understand where we are and how we will make change, or what impact our change will have. So in ICES, we've started on a plan for a systematic collection of gender disaggregated data for the entire network of scientists. And in parallel, the ICES committed in 2019 to a strategic plan where they recognize the importance of a diverse, inclusive, and gender balanced organization. And that was really for me where the stars aligned. And I was very lucky that the recruitment for the DFO sponsored Empowering Women project came across my desk. As a mature student, without this scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to take on this project and to take the step in developing my own career. And at the same time, the gender mainstreaming project in ICES would also not have been possible at the depth that is happening thanks to the involvement in this project. So I'm learning a lot this past year and a half since I started, and I'm learning that representation matters, awareness matters, and we need to create spaces to have conversations about this as we're doing today. I'm also learning that there's a lot of support out there. In my research, I've also started to have these conversations with the ICES community, and I've just found like overwhelming support from people just wanting to come and how can they help and how can they help me to make progress on my research. But I'm also learning how to deal with resistance. And in terms of challenges, I think we still have some to go, and we need to shift the perception that empowering women and making change is only women's work. We need people of all genders to get on board and help to make change. And that is really important in the context of the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis, where there's already a lot of evidence of women disproportionately being affected. But also in terms of the UN Ocean Decade, if we're aiming at transformational change, we also need to transform ourselves. We all carry implicit bias, and we need to work actively against it. Yeah, so that's my path. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. It certainly has been a great pleasure to work with you and Renis for this program. Now, if I may pass on to our next speaker, Ms. Fatou Shaw, who who's currently enrolled in the MSc program on Maritime Law and Policy. Fatou mentioned that she's been sponsored by the Norwegian Seafarers Union, and she currently holds the president of the WMU Women's Association. So over to you, Fatou.
Thank you very much. Women play a crucial role in leadership and national development, and they deserve to be supported across continents. This session speaks to the theme of 2021 International Women's Day. There must be a conscious, a deliberate effort to empower women in career development so that their relevance in the international space can be felt by all, as they have so much to offer in the area of leadership. Prominent women in the leadership is the president of the World Maritime University, Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia-Henry, who against all odds has continued to make her voice heard in the maritime sector, especially as the COVID-19 pandemic tore on the seafarers as regards their mental health, among others, salient issues. Also, the recent appointment of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the first female Director General of the World Trade Organization, speaks volumes in the quest to give women a chance to lead. For me, I was motivated to contest for the position of the president of the World Maritime University Women Association to serve based on my passion and commitment to work with women from diverse cultural and professional backgrounds within the industry. In the light of this, there must be concerted efforts to encourage women to equip themselves to take interest in national building globally. As a way of empowerment, there must be some sort of cooperation to assist the female gender across female to gender access scholarship from higher studies in order to give them opportunity to engage in healthy academic competition with the male folks. One notable and commendable achievement in the maritime world is the increased admission of females at the World Maritime University for the set of 2021 with a percentage of 35% women. This must be followed by campaigns from the elementary schools to the higher institutions to create awareness about opportunities abounding in the sector that is almost a male-dominant sector. Suffice me to say that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 4 and 5 on equal education and gender equality should be followed to the letter in order to help achieve more participation of women or the female folks. For us as women of the World Maritime University, we intend to contribute our quota in the system by engaging in sensitization seminars geared towards empowering women in the sector so that their voices can be heard in the community of maritime nations. Let me use this opportunity to appreciate my sponsors, the Norwegian Seafarers, for the opportunity to obtain a degree in maritime affairs alongside other women that have benefited from the scheme, as it will help boost our capacity and knowledge of the industry. Conclusively, all hands must be on deck to ensure the roles of women in leadership is a priority, as they cannot be relegated in the quest for positive change in the global space. It must also be said that while we seek the inclusion of women in global leadership, the place for self-determination and personal development for the women folks is crucial. Therefore, women must strive for excellence through the path of education in order to be able to compete favorably with their counterparts in various sectors of the world economy. Thank you very much and enjoy your celebration today on the International Women's Day.
Thank you, Fatou, for sharing your own perspective. Now, moving on to our last panelist, which I believe is well known to many of our alumni. Professor Mahir is a graduate of WMU himself, and he has been a member of the resident faculty since 1998. If I may say, Professor Mahir is the eyewitness of the growth of WMU, and he's best positioned to share the progress in promoting the empowerment of women through education at the university. Professor Mahir, the mic is yours.
Thank you again, Dr. Sun, and good afternoon, everyone, especially our WMU alumni attending this webinar. Allow me to add my felicitations to all women around the world on this special occasion commemorating International Women's Day. Greetings also to my fellow panelists and speakers, led by our president, Dr. Dumbia Henry, and keynote speakers, Ms. Alison Webb and Ms. Liana Deering. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share some thoughts that I feel are relevant to both International Women's Day and the important role that the World Maritime University plays in promoting women in the maritime field. Let me start with a brief historical review. Like Dr. Sun mentioned, as far as WMU is concerned, I'm as old as the hills, and I can give you a brief historical review from my own experience. During these more than 2 decades as a member of the faculty, I am proud to have witnessed many female firsts here at the World Maritime University. I was here when we welcomed our first woman professor, first woman associate professor, assistant professor, and lecturer. I was here when we welcomed our first woman registrar. And of course, I was very proud when we welcomed our first WMU president, Dr. Cleopatra Dumbia Henry. Back to the faculty, as a footnote, I must mention that WMU did have a highly competent female lecturer in the faculty's English and Study Skills department from the start of the university. But as far as maritime studies were concerned, it wasn't really until more than 15 years later that we had our first female professor. Today, there are no less than 14 women on the teaching and research staff at WMU, serving in capacities from research associate to professor and head of specialization. But what makes me even prouder are WMU's gender-related gains in its student bodies. In 1983, only 2 out of the 71 members of the inaugural Master of Science class at WMU were women. That's 3% of the class. 10 years later, in 1993, when I myself was enrolled in the WMU Master of Science program, there were 6 women in my cohort, including the first woman captain ever to be enrolled in the program. My classmates and I were obviously very proud of that fact, but that still was only 7% of women in the cohort. Fast forward to 2020 and 2021, mentioned already by our president, of the total number of graduates, 35% are women. Now, let's look at the PhD program here at WMU. Out of the first 10 graduates of the WMU PhD program, only 1 was a woman. That's 10%. Only 5 years later, we now count 5 women graduates out of the 24 PhD degrees awarded so far, which is 21%. That's more than double compared to our early days. But the future is even more promising because as of today, I am proud to report that 18 out of the 44 enrolled PhD students are women, and that is 41%. So we are therefore approaching parity in this very important area. There's much to be proud of because of these relative gains that we have witnessed at WMU. I'm very proud that we have made progress in making the university inclusive. But to ask a related question, I'd like to ask, am I satisfied? And the answer is no, and I shouldn't be. None of us should be until we achieve parity and until we have broken down all barriers that continue to sustain gender as a visible or invisible factor to who gets what, when, where, and how. In other words, we still have a long voyage ahead of us. We are still far from gender parity in the maritime industry. As Dr. Dumbia Henry said in her opening, and I quote, "However, we also must acknowledge that we are still very far from equal rights and equal opportunities for everyone and between men and women, particularly in positions of leadership," end of quote. I feel we really need to see women where they truly belong, and that is everywhere in the maritime industry. Of course, we should acknowledge that there is progress everywhere. Let me take examples from my home country. The Philippine Coast Guard only last month promoted the first 2 women to admiral rank. I am sure that more will follow in the future, and many of them will be women WMU graduates. Going to another agency, while I was at the Maritime Industry Authority, or Marina, I was always proud to note that the agency achieved full parity in terms of the total number of employees and in terms of the number of women holding senior management positions. Many of them, by the way, women WMU graduates. However, while my country still is one of the world's biggest seafaring nations and one of the world's most gender equal countries, women still only account for around 2% of the total seafaring population. Clearly, there is still plenty of room for improvement everywhere. If we don't encourage girls and women, we will continue to miss out on a substantial part of the world's brain power and talent pool. But we, as a human collective, need to continue not only encouraging women and girls to take their place, but to actually actively and vigorously put them in places where we know they belong, which is on board ships, in boardrooms of shipping companies and ports, in universities, in research institutions, in science councils, in maritime administrations, in government ministries and agencies, in international organizations, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mejia. That's a very strong message coming from you, and also speaking from the heart of WMU, which I believe. So next, we'll move on to our Q&A session. Before that, I would like to share the result of the poll that you have all participated. So we received 131 responses. Among those participants, we have 84% female participants, equals to 110, and 16% of male participants. If I may take the liberty to ask the first question, I would like to throw this ball to our president. How to make sure that we reach out to our counterpart of the importance of gender equality, which I believe empowerment of women will reach the result means equality for all. It's beneficial for women, but it shouldn't be just for women. We need the male population to support and to participate in this. So from your experience and also from expectations, how should we encourage more participants from our male counterpart? And dear participants, please share your questions through the Q&A session. We'll take it after answering the first question. Madam President, please. Sorry, Madam President, you're muted.
Yeah. Just to get a clarification from you for the question, to be more precise about the question.
How to encourage the male population to support women's movement?
Okay, thank you. Well, certainly, I would say that the generation today's generation of men and women, and I would say today's generation of men, I think there's been I don't want to call it a sea change in the perspective. It is very clear in my mind that we have really very important opportunities today, both as women, to occupy positions at the senior level. I think the challenge is in maritime. You see that one of our, in other words, generally globally now across the sectors, we find that more and more women are in leadership positions. And our wonderful student mentioned the recently appointed Director General of WTO. I mean, what a fabulous thing. That's the first woman head of an international trade organization, WTO. This, we know a lot of the issues around this thing. And so I think that was an important message to the whole world and to women everywhere that would help empower us wherever we may be. She comes from Nigeria, and she was able to, win a very competitive process to become the Secretary General of WTO. That's fabulous. We need to see more such women. Of course, we've had them in the human rights departments and things like that. But we need to see women in positions that are not just the ones that look like the soft skills ones, but the hardcore ones, like WTO and others like that. You have organizations, ITU, and even the International Labour Organization has up till today not had a woman director general. So I have a problem with that. I mean, the oldest UN organization since, it was established. So we do have a challenge, because even if an organization as old as the ILO, it has not yet appointed a woman director general. So yesterday we have a lot of challenges. What can we do as women? I think all of us, both men and women, I think we have a lot of men who are ready, who are supporting women, who are ready to do that. The maritime field still has a long way to go. And of course, COVID-19 and the whole issues that we see happen with the pandemic and the impact it has had on seafaring, certainly, in my view, will discourage and has discouraged, I'm sure, many women who would have wanted to go to sea, even on the cruise ships, as Lena indicated. So I am concerned that the maritime sector may be seen, particularly after seeing, and they are just men on board those, most of them are men on board the ships that are still not able to go home and meet their families and to have, a normal life, or at least to have a break from being at sea for so many months of the year. And more than a month, more than a year already, some of them are today at sea without being able to go back home and at the end of their contractual period. So this is one of I see this as one of the developments that unfortunately will dissuade women from going to sea. And that we'll have to see how that can be, the sort of, this can be rejigged and get women again interested in going to sea, apart from those who are in the Coast Guard or others. But those who are in the pure core maritime business on board as seafarers, I can see that will be a huge challenge. What can we do? We shouldn't give up. We should take the bandwagon of empowering women in all economic sectors. And we should not, of course, once we hope the pandemic is over and vaccines are available globally, we should then start a new campaign. I think it's difficult now to start a campaign when such a campaign will have to be, it's put off a little bit, but a campaign should be restarted as to how we take on board the consequences of what COVID-19 has done across the board, including to the ocean and maritime industries. In the maritime, for the ocean industry, I think we have a hope that this can open up more, not just for scientists, women scientists, but more women interested in ocean affairs. So both on the maritime and the ocean side, there's a lot of work to be done. We hope that we will have a trampoline that will enable us to look at all of these issues and see how are we going to take the women empowerment forward after the pandemic, after we've managed to manage, after we have managed the pandemic, again, say after, but once the pandemic has been adequately managed, how are we going to rebuild that and attract women to the industry, whether it's oceans or in certainly, and more importantly, more difficult at sea seafarers?
Thank you, Madam President. You seem to have already addressed some questions in the Q&A session. How should we move forward with this current situation? If I may pass out questions to our two keynote speakers, if I may summarize, there are two specific questions. The first one relates to how women from developing countries, or what he called or she called it third world countries, be actively participant in policy making and leadership role globally, and how could this, how women from developing countries access opportunities like our counterpart to improve our opportunities in leadership. The second one is more relating to how to encourage young women, younger generation, for them to realize there is opportunity in maritime and ocean, and for them to take a further career path in these sectors.
Thanks. I can take a crack at it, and maybe Lena wants to follow up with me. So thanks for the questions, really good questions. I think we have a responsibility that's broader than just within our own borders. And I think, for myself, I'm really lucky that I happen to be born Canadian, and that's just an accident of birth. There's nothing that I did to earn that. And I think we have a responsibility broader to help people in other countries that don't have the same advantages that we do. And that's a role that Canada takes really seriously. So within the context of the Ocean Decade, providing opportunities for people in least developing countries and small island developing countries is very important. And we can do that in a number of ways. Like I mentioned, we can host open fora where people can participate. As long as you have a computer and an internet connection, you're able to participate. I think we can offer mentoring opportunities for women that cross borders. Again, with the internet and the way things are advancing now with technology, we're able to support people in terms of governance, policymaking skills. We can bring them in those mentoring roles. And we can also use things like secondment opportunities and working through cross-member states to work on projects together. There's a lot of collaborative opportunities that we're able to do, as well as providing opportunities through funding where we can sponsor people in other parts of the world so that they can have broader opportunities. So I think it's just opening up that whole world for us. And we just have to continue not to be just focused on the situation in our own country. As it's been raised now by many of the speakers, we still have a ways to go, not just in terms of women, but also non-binary and other types of issues. We have to make sure that we don't forget about those. But there is a lot of opportunity now, more than there has been in the past, and we just have to be taking up that opportunity. With young girls, one of the things that I think is really important is for people to see women in leadership roles, to be visible. And you can do that through a variety of means, through social media, through campaigns, video, etc. Just that people, when, young girls, when they start off, that they don't immediately think of someone who's on a ship as being male, someone who is working in ocean science as being a male, that's the first image comes to their mind. No, their image should be broader than that. And the more that they see women in these roles through different types of campaigns and communication, I think they'll be thinking differently about the possibilities for them. And I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Lena and see if she wants to add.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is definitely a challenge, and unfortunately, I have to say, a challenge that I am familiar with. We still see and we still hear. It's not only a couple of weeks ago where I spoke to a woman who graduated from a maritime university in her home country with great results, top of her class. She did really, really well, only to find out that when she would graduated, there was no job out there because employers refused to hire her because she was a woman. And they said this outright to her. So there are definitely some pretty heavy challenges out there still related to that. And I don't think there's, like Allison here also said, there's not one solution that will fix everything, but I think it's a we have to look for several solutions. I do want to highlight the role that the international labor union movement and the ITF in particular plays here, as an international solidarity and helping each other, and also promoting women seafarers there. And then that can also, the unions in those countries where this is a problem, the unions there can play an active role in changing this and promoting women's roles in the maritime community and at sea in particular. It is a big challenge, unfortunately, I have to say. I think also on attracting, there are several challenges also in terms of attracting young women to a career at sea. One thing is that there, in many places in this world, there is just no culture for women to go to sea, and there is, and when the young girl says that this is something she wants to do, she may not get a whole lot of support from her family or from her friends or from from her community that her male counterpart would get. So that is, and then culture is something that you change or changed over time. So that is something that we have to work on and promote seafaring in a positive light. I also think we have to work on making seafaring a more family, a career that you can also combine with family life in a better way than you can today. And sometimes I think that is a little bit of kind of the pink elephant in the room. You have to work on, contract lengths and rotation schedules and things like that make it a little bit easier for seafarers to combine life at sea with life at home. And I think, not to be too general, but I think that is tends to be more important for women than for men. I'm very general right now because it's of course very important for men too. But I think in order to attract more women, I think it is very important to focus on that. And that again is change that is done over time. It's not something that is changed overnight. So especially from a union perspective, that is something that we focus on and keep working on every day. Thank you.
Thanks to you both. The next question, I realize we are approaching time, so I think I will perhaps just take two more questions and then we'll move on to a closing. So the first one I would like to take is, under the current situation, and more often than not, women take more responsibilities at home. That means they are only be able to commit working part-time. And so whether there are programs that would enable women to obtain skills and to obtain the right education to participate or promote to their career. So who would like to take this question?
Nobody?
Please, Madam President.
Nobody wants to take the question? Lena?
Sorry, yes, I was looking at, of course, I was thinking about how to do that. Of course, working part-time is something that is that a lot of women tend to do. We just had a big discussion here in my home country, not related to the maritime industry in particular, but in my home country here. That is one of the biggest focuses here in the Norwegian women's movement, is to actually counteract the high levels of part-time work that women have, and encourage more women to work full-time, and to make the workforce a better place to work full-time, while also combining working full-time with the other kind of roles that you have in your family and otherwise as well outside of work. So it is a challenge for women. I think, so in that sense, I guess, with that in mind, it would be to encourage more women to work full time. But in order to be able to do that, you would have to also have necessary, again, I'm coming back to challenges with having a family, as this tends, again, very general here. I know this is not the fact for everyone, but it tends to fall more and to be more relevant for a lot of women. So you have to have an infrastructure in the background that can help you with the other responsibilities that you have in your life. So, but also it's to combine, I don't know, I'm not sure that answered the questions, but, but that is my thoughts on the part-time issue, at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. It certainly is not the easiest question to answer. I think we have many good questions. What I would like to take is perhaps some encouraging notes passing from our speakers to our participants on the theme of women's empowerment. If I may start from probably the reverse order, Professor Mahaya.
Thank you, Jen. Well, I guess I would like to give a message to my fellow male here in the fellow men in this webinar, and that is for us to take a very proactive role in giving women space and opportunity to prove and demonstrate their capabilities and competences. They are just as competent, or what I have found is even that they are more competent in many cases than we are, but they just need to be given the space and the encouragement. So I'd like to give that to our male listeners, and for the women. Again, happy International Women's Day, and I just encourage you to keep at it. I think we will get there sometime in the future. Thank you.
Can I have 2 more volunteers, please? Madam President.
Mute myself. I'm looking at some of the questions asked by during this webinar, and one of the questions related to women in developing countries. How can they actively participate in leadership within the maritime industry? Again, you know, I think when we think of the maritime industry, of course, one component of it is seafaring and women at sea. But where you do find a lot of women is women in the management of shipping operations. And I'm sure that Lena also knows a lot about that. You have a lot of women who, let's say, you know, land-based, and who are managing. I know a number of women who have, women who are actually owners of shipping companies. So I think these are a group of people not to forget. I have a couple of them who are friends. I know them very well, and they are running shipping operations, having created their own companies. So because shipping is a global industry, and there of course are 2 sides to shipping. One is of course seafaring, and therefore those who go to sea. But when I think about all of the graduates that come out of WMU, can make, and that is maritime and oceans, and they can make a huge impact And that is where WMU, in my view, with that lead role it has in terms of education at the senior level, you know, building people up so that they can move from the first degree level and go into really senior management positions. We are seeing WMU having a huge impact there. The more we have women, and therefore we need more donors funding women. The more we have women, the more they will be able to occupy these land-based positions that either in terms of managing of maritime shipping operations in their own in their ministries, or privately as, you know, ship owners themselves, or as managing shipping companies. So you find most of them are managing shipping companies. And I know a few in Greece, in the US, who are very much into management of shipping operations. And so we do have some role models, and probably the next time it would be good if we did something like that, to bring in a few of the women, and I know a few of them quite well, that could give us a bit of the experiences of how did they manage to find themselves in, you know, the management of shipping operations. Some of them have, and I know one who has inherited from her father, and now is the one running the shipping operations, big operations in Greece and in Cyprus. So we do have some really good examples there, but they are still few and far between. But you know, so these are other areas and other how we can also look at the maritime sector, and more of them, and hopefully from the graduates from WMU are going into senior management roles, running shipping operations, managing that, both men and women. And there again is something that we should not forget, that many of our graduates go back into the administration and they help build the capacity of the country, which is the critical thing of that's what WMU was set up to do, build the capacity of developing countries. But there, what we need is both men and women, more, not just send us more women, you know, identify more women but for that, of course, actually, the problem is not that we have the numbers, we just don't have the fellowships to give them. We have enough women who apply to us every year to come to the university, where we then build capacity at management level in maritime and ocean affairs. We just don't have enough fellowships that you know, we have had some fantastic donors, and you know, I want to thank Canada, and I want to thank the Seafarers the Norwegian Seafarers Association, the ITF. We have the Nippon Foundation. We have some really well-established donors, but that donor base is too small. That donor base needs to grow. That's one of my challenges that I have, which is, you know, which is Stewards of the Sea, promoting the Stewards of the Sea campaign. And the Stewards of the Sea is men and women. It's a neutral term, Stewards of the Sea. And there we hope that we could get more buy-in, more support, bring in, you know, the industry to work with the university to enable us to grow the industry, continue to help grow the industry as a modern industry today, not one of the old days, but one of today and the one for the future, so that we can better train, educate, and build the capacity of many, many more men and women around the world, and in particular from developing countries, because shipping, most of the shipping operations, where are they? The shipping is actually flagged under the developing countries. And that's one of those my big battle, if I could have one, but without being making too much of a revolution about it, because then you know, that will not be what I am supposed to do. But we need to raise awareness about the fact that many of the developing countries are flag states. But the operations are not in the flag states. They are in the developed world, and that's where the money goes, okay? And so this is a big challenge that we have with the industry, but the more we bring in, and we can educate and see graduating at the postgraduate level, and that senior management level, of people from the developing world, the more we can grow that capacity and expand it to both men and women, and one day come to equity in this area. The more we do that, the more we can do that, I think the better it will be for the future of maritime.
Thank you, Madam President. That definitely spot on and the very strong messages. I would like to invite Professor Long for the final comments before we move to the closure. Professor Long.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's an incredibly stimulating and inspirational webinar this afternoon. Very much like to thank the President and indeed our very much distinguished keynote speakers, and indeed our activists and advocates within the university and further afield. We're immensely proud of everybody. I suppose kind of the big takeaway I have was raised by both directors and indeed our distinguished keynote speakers, is the importance of evidence and the importance of research and the importance of this being a lifelong mission. I think that was very clearly evident on all the contributions. Again, I'd like to congratulate our sponsors for allowing us to collect that evidence for the Decade of Ocean Science. But following up on that, we need specific objectives in relation to gender equality, and we must continuously reassess. So it's about a process, and I think that's very important that we're participating in this process today, a very important day for the global community, and a very happy International Women's Day to everybody on the webinar this afternoon. So Dr. Jensen, thank you very much.
Thank you. As the passionate speaks out, I think from our panelists and speakers, it is really a topic that touches our hearts, but we are coming to the closer of today's webinar. Now I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Laura Sanchez from our MSc student. She's an event coordinator at WMU Women's Association to share her remarks and also to share a video from the Women's Association to close today's webinar. Laura, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. First, I would like to say to all the audience attending our celebration, thank you so much for time and consideration, and invite all the participants to follow the updates activities of the WMU Women's Association on the official website in Facebook. Let me tell you that this is a really special International Women's Day that find all of us facing possibly the most complex health situation all over the time. However, we are committed to demonstrate that we are still working. And today we have the opportunity to highlight in this webinar women in leadership, achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. As also the world knows, a key empowerment tool for women in leadership is education. The COVID-19 crisis has impacted women's opportunities to access the education and training required to build paths toward leadership roles. Today, all of us have been witness to the commitment of the World Maritime University promoting the empowerment of women through their research and education programs. Thank you so much to the President of World Maritime University, Dr. Cleopatra Dumbia Henry, for your constant effort, future vision, and support for those professional women in the shipping sector. Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing today such an extended experience in the field. Ms. Alison Webb for Canada's initiative to promote the empowerment of women under the ocean decade. Ms. Lina Dreen, Director of Cruise Operation at Norwegian Seafarers Union. All the panelists, all the participants, and all the women that every day are pushing the recognition of equal rights and empowerment of women in education worldwide. To finish today's webinar, I'll let you go with go on with the celebrations. I invite you to watch a short video made by World Maritime University Women's Association. And let me explain you that the torch that we are passing by represents knowledge, represents truth, divinity, liberty, freedom, leadership, and education. I hope you really enjoy it and enjoy the rest of your day and night, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you so much.
This is wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We certainly had a great discussion. And the last message I want to share personally is to say thank you to our students. The university is as strong, as reputable because of you. And you are the reason for many of us to choose to be academic, to choose to be a teacher. So for that, I thank you. Thank you for all our participants for this successful webinar. Goodbye and have a good celebration. We'll see you on our next event.